Hey all, welcome to Parker's Reefs. On today's episode, we're going to check out the Qijian 3 from Kamoer. All right, thank you for joining me on yet another episode of Parker's Reefs. And as touched on in the intro, today we are checking out this fancy device from Kamoer Aquariums called the Qijian 3. Now, I'm not going to for a second pretend that I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's what I'm going to call it throughout this review. So if that upsets you, I apologize in advance. But what this device is, as it says on the box here, is an intelligent sensor. Now, basically, it's a small device that has a number of probes that connect to it, from electrical conductivity to temperature to pH to ORP, and even the option of a dissolved oxygen sensor in there. And it will connect those sensors to this device, that device to the cloud, and that cloud to your phone, and send you push notifications should things get out of whack, but also keep a history of all those sensors so you can see any trends or changes that are happening in your aquarium. Now, I don't intend on making this a review per se. I don't like to tell you what suits you and your aquarium, but what I will do is I'll give you the overview, we'll unbox this device, we'll set it up, and I'll show you it in operation on my dream reef tank, go over some of the pros and cons, and let you make your own mind up if this device is suitable for you and your aquarium. So with that in mind, without any further ado, let's jump into the unboxing of the Kamoer Qijian 3. All right, let's unbox this device and see exactly what we get. First thing you notice is it's a pretty small box for something that has this many probes and obviously can read this many parameters. And pretty much the only thing of interest on the box is that it's iOS and Android compatible via a cloud, which connects to your router, which then connects to this device, which then connects obviously to all of those probes, which gives you the parameters for each of those things we are monitoring. So without any further ado, let's reef this box open, see what we can find. Get a little bit of protective foam first. Of course, some instructions which we will follow shortly when we go to set this unit up. But we'll get that aside and bring out the piece de resistance. Now, I'm actually quite surprised at how small this unit is. There's not a lot to it. You can see it's about the width of a palm and a little bit thicker than my thumb. And we've got probes, connections all along the side here. So we've got a bit of dissolved oxygen probe here on the side, which is an optional extra. It does not come in the box. And you can see that is a slightly different connector there. It's got this multi-pin. The rest here are all BNC style connectors from ORP, pH, temperature, electrical conductivity, which will give us our salinity. Down the bottom, we do have a power connector, and then there are 3 connectors here which look like a sort of a LAN style Ethernet connector. I'm assuming they are expansions or something that'll connect into dosing pumps like that. So we'll check those out a little bit later, but it is quite a small little device, which is really cool to see. It's going to look very neat, mounted somewhere. There are no buttons or anything on it to control the screen. The screen is purely just for you to look at. You can do all of your actions through the app itself. Now, apart from that, we do get some probe holders here because we do have a lot of probes to hold. And these are your standard Kamoer probe holders. They're a little acrylic piece here. You put a screw through here to lock it onto your tank or your sump, and another screw through here to hold the probe in place. I actually won't be using these this time around because my sump and my tank both have rims on them, which make these style probe holders not work for me. But you'll see our solution there in a minute. Now, if we take off that next level of protection foam, we are greeted with all the probes under here. Now, before we get to those, I will just have a quick look. We've got the screws, which are the remaining pieces for those probe holders. Again, we won't be using those. We do have this interesting little mount. So there's 2 pieces here, a male and a female side, which I assume has some sort of adhesive backing on it, which will allow us to put one side onto here and one side onto a wall in our tank or something like that, and make it so we can easily slide this on and off and mount it in place, which is a nice little touch. We have a power supply. Being in Australia, I've got the Australian power supply, 24 volts, 1 amp, so a pretty standard power supply from Kamoer. Similar sort of amperage and voltage that runs all of their devices. We have a bunch of calibration solutions because we have a bunch of probes. Now, this first one here is an ORP solution. We then move on to this one's a conductivity solution, which is going to give us our salinity measurements. And then we should have 2 pHs. Now, looking at these, yes, Kamoer do things a little bit different here. We do have a pH 9.18 and a pH 6.86. They do just like to have slightly different pHs other than your standard 479, things like that. But they obviously do that for a reason, not just to be difficult, I'm sure. And then, of course, last but least, we move into our probes. Now, Each one of these probes has a color-coded connector which will line up onto the device itself, and a label here. So this one tells us it's pH probe. All of their probes come with a little protective cap on the end. Some of them will have fluids in there because the probe will need to remain wet. If it dries out, it goes off. And yeah, that's our pH probe. It does look slightly different to pH probes I've seen before, so that'll be interesting, but a standard BNC style connector. Onto our next probe. This one is our electrical conductivity probe. This thing's got some pretty wild looking sensors in there. I must admit, I've not used an electrical conductivity probe before, so this will be interesting. Does not look like it's actually stored in any solution. It's just a protective cap. Onto our next probe. This one is our ORP probe, which I have used before, but again, this one's bright red with the probe red. The connector red does have some solution in there to keep that probe wet. And then last but not least, one that pretty much everyone in the aquarium game should have used, and that is a temperature sensor. This one with the BNC style connector to hook up to the Qijian 3 itself. Again, super long lead on these. All of these probes have what I think is a 3-meter long lead, which is awesome because there's nothing worse than being restricted to where you can mount your unit in relation to the probes. These have got heaps of miles and miles of length on that lead, which means placing those probes out of sight where you can get to them easily for maintenance but not be distracted by them is a super cool addition. And let's be honest, it's going to cost the company cents to do, but it's going to save us reefers a lot of hassle. Now, that is everything in the box. So I think we're best off getting some power, getting some water, and setting this unit up, getting it hooked up to my app, calibrating these probes, and then getting it set up on the tank. All right, so I've got my unit here, I've got power ready to plug in, and I've connected up all of my probes, which I have sitting in a cup of salt water here. I've also got a cup of RO DI water to rinse the probes out between calibration, and I've got some paper towel just in case we run into any trouble. So I guess there's nothing further to do than remove the screen protector, plug some power in, and the unit comes to life, which is fantastic. Now, what I am going to do at this stage is grab my phone here. I'm going to jump into the Kamoer application. I'm going to add this unit, and then we can go about calibrating these. So, all right, so I've got my Kamoer remote app here, and I'm going to just click on the plus to add a new device. I'm going to search through until I see the Qijian 3. Here it is here. And it's already found one via Bluetooth, so I can click on that. Now it's going to ask me what Wi-Fi I want to connect to. I'm going to make sure I connect to the 2.4 gigahertz. I'm not actually sure if this requires 2.4 or 5 gigahertz is possible, but I'm going to connect to my 2.4 gigahertz network. All right, now you can see the device is connecting to the network. Hopefully that means we get it all bound and connected into the app, and then we can go about calibrating these probes. Okay, successful to connect. All right, we can go start to use. Now you can see the device has popped up in my list of Kamoer products here. Ignore the Calibration pump. I do currently have that disconnected. I actually have the Frag ATO pump in its place at the moment, so that is the only reason why that one is offline. I'm going to jump into this one here, and I'm going to, first thing I want to do is rename it. I'm going to time sync the firmware, which always seems to be a problem for me, but that's okay. Let's see if we can go to settings and change the name of this device, because that is horrendous. Parker's Reef Qijian. All right, save that. Okay, next thing I want to check is that my firmware is up to date, and it appears it is, so that is fantastic. We can now jump back to the sensors, and we can go about calibrating each of these. I think we may as well go top to bottom, because obviously the dissolved oxygen sensor down the bottom there, which is really only used in a breeding operation, is offline. It's not connected where all of our other sensors are. So I'm going to start off with the pH. I'm going to click on that, and then we're going to go to settings. I can change the name of it if I want to. I am also going to send alerts, but I'll probably calibrate it first, and that is where I set up when it gets out of range. But pH calibration is the first thing we need to do. Now, I've been keeping my calibration fluids in my pocket, making sure they are nice and warm, because we do have to get these up to 25 degrees Celsius. And at the moment here in Australia, it's quite cold. So I've got these up to temperature, and I've got my two pH calibration fluids here. So I'm going to go to calibrate and see what it asks me to do. It tells me to have the solutions ready, has all the things I need to do, so I can say I'm ready. And yes, it tells me to take the cover off. Already done that, we're all good. It also says do not submerge the whole probe into the water, so I do also have these with the connectors up out of the water. So I can say I see. Now it's asking me to rinse the probe, which make sure I get the pH probe. All right, so I'm just going to grab the pH probe out of the salt water. I'm going to give it a little rinse in the RODI water, and then I'm going to give it a little pat down here, just to make sure all of that salt water and RO water is off. Being super gentle with the probe at this point. All right. Now it's asking me to put it in the 6.86 solution, which is this one here. And the temperature probe too, so that's a vital step there. In fact, I might even use the temperature probe to pierce. All right, temperature probe's in, pH probe is in, and as a result, that does fill the calibration vial up, so I am glad that I did get the paper towel there. I can let that stand. You should also give the probe a little shake in there just to get get all of the air bubbles and anything that may be trapped under that little dome free. And then we just have to wait 2 minutes. So we might go through the magic of YouTube and fast forward. All right, now that that has stood for the 2 minutes, I can also see on screen that it is reading exactly 6.86 pH, which is awesome, but I'm going to click calibrate anyway because it is the next step. That's going to tell it that it actually is 6.86, and we are good to move on to the next step. You can see the app is taking its time having a little think about setting that, and it's saying do not move the electrode during calibration. I don't think that's going to take long, although it's going up in 1.5% increments. Oh, there we go, it is done, great. So I can now remove these items from there, can put them back into the salt water for now, put the lid back onto this solution. Technically, you probably shouldn't use these calibration fluids again, but if you can keep them in a nice temperature controlled dark space, they should be okay. But it does tell me to get the 9.8 ready. We're obviously going to do the same steps again for that one, and then likewise the same steps again for the other two. So we might fast forward through those through the magic of YouTube. All right, now that I've finished calibrating the electrical conductivity, we are good to go and then set up all of our notification limits. So I'm going to jump back here. I'm going to send alerts for this. I'm going to leave the threshold in the standard threshold for now. I can obviously adjust that for a low and a high, but to be honest, I don't actually know the values for electrical conductivity, so I'm going to leave that where it is right now. But I am going to go back to my other values like pH, and I'm going to set some into the settings. I'm going to set some thresholds in here as well. Now, you can see by default that is 0 to 10 pH. That's not going to work for me. I want it to tell me if things get to 7.6, and I want it to tell me if things go over 8.5. So pretty tight range there, but that is the setting that I work with the Reef factory pH meter, and that tells me when either my skimmer intake is clogged and my pH is dropped, or I've run out of calcosa, or if my CO2 for the calcium reactor has run out and the pH goes high. So I'm going to set that notification range there, and I'm going to do the same thing for each of the other values. So I'm going to jump into salinity. That one I might need to do when it's actually in the tank, because currently we're reading quite a low salinity, obviously. Temperature, we can do the same. All right, so I think it's at this point in time, I can take it off my little mad test bench here. We'll put it on the tank, get this controller mounted up, and let it do its thing for a couple days. All right, so I was able to move the Qijian 3 over to the Dream Reef tank easy enough. With all of those sensors already plugged in and calibrated, all I did was grab an old magnetic frag rack, believe it or not, that I had laying around, put that in the sump, which allowed me to sit all the probes in there nice and easily, and also make it easy to adjust the height to make sure that none of those connectors or the tops of those probes get submerged in water at all. Now, I did run into one problem, and it was only apparent after I moved everything over to the Dream Reef tank and got all of the probes in the sump, and that was that when I did the calibration of the conductivity solution, I was actually miles off when I was entering in a value. Now, I'll show on screen now, the fine folk at Kamoer do actually have a good tutorial on how to set this up, and they very clearly state that when you have to put in what the value of the conductivity solution is, even though this is listed as 50 ms, the application is asking you for the value in US, which I'm sure there's a technical term for that, but basically do not put 50 in there, put 50,000 in there, and then your conductivity will calibrate much, much more accurately. And I'm glad to say that a simple recalibration of that solution brought the salinity right back on track and aligned with all of my other salinity monitors. Now there's nothing left to do but let the device do its thing for a few days and see how it settles in. All right, so a week has gone by and the Kamoer Qijian 3 has been working away absolutely faultlessly throughout all this time. That being said, I've got to say I haven't had any huge dramas in the tank in that time frame, so I've really only relied on just going into the app and having a look at the different values, seeing how they're trending. Things like pH and that I'll show up on screen now. Little forewarning, my tank does run fairly low in pH and my CO2 scrubbing media is due for replacement. But you can see you get nice little trend graphs as it goes from day to night and rolls over into the next day again. Now, interestingly, things like my ORP have been slowly increasing. I'm not sure if that is because the probe is settling in or if there is something happening in the tank. I'm thinking probably the former one, which is totally fine. At some point, they should probably level off and I could probably give it another calibration at that point. Things like temperature and salinity have been rock steady. They haven't moved much at all, which is always a good sign. And like I touched on, I don't have the dissolved oxygen sensor to really test that side out. But all in all, the Qijian 3 has been really, really neat. It sits in here perfectly. The little display is just bright enough that I can go past and open up this cabinet door and have a glancing look at any stage for the parameters. But otherwise, it's unobtrusive and just stays out of the way. The app has worked completely fine. No dropouts, no issues at all. And I can jump in there and have a look at those values from anywhere in the world. But unfortunately, lately, I've only really been sitting here at the tank or at the desk at work. But it is still nice to be able to open up that app and have a look exactly where temperature is, salinity is, pH, and of course, ORP, even though that value doesn't mean all that much to me just yet. All right, guys, there you have it. That is the unboxing and overview of the Kamoer Qijian 3. Definitely not a review like I said in the intro. I will let you guys make up your mind as to whether it is suitable for you and your aquarium, but all I can do is share with you the findings I found from the product. And I've got to say, whilst I wouldn't say it is cheap, have a look at the prices in your local market. In Australia, it ranges around the $1,200 mark, which is absolutely not a small chunk of change. But when you have a look at the sensors that are included with that, it is a fair bit of processing power. And if you compare it to some of the other controllers on the market, obviously it comes in a lot cheaper, but it is a little more limited on what functionality it can do with those sensors. Now, that being said, despite being an automation junkie, I really do like to have devices like this in a monitor mode. I like to let them monitor and then alert me when things are out of whack, so I can then make the informed decision as to what I want to change or put into action to address that parameter getting out of whack. When things are set to automatically react to a value, and obviously things like ATOs and that, if your water gets low, put fresh water in, completely fine, but there are obviously risks involved with that. But when we start talking about ORP, pH, temperature, sure, it's important, electrical conductivity and things like that, you probably don't want too many devices running automated based off those values, but that does not diminish the value of those parameters at all. So whilst there are those expansion ports on the Qijian 3, personally, I'm in no hurry to hook them up to any sort of dosing pump to dose in some sort of liquid ORP or turn on an ozone machine or something like that. I personally want to see the results, have them logged, and also send me a push notification when things get out of whack. And that is exactly what the Qijian 3 does very, very well. There are no doubt a couple of little quirks to the Kamoer app, but it was pretty easy to set up once I got over that little hump of the value I needed to put in for the conductivity calibration being 50,000, not 50, because they were different measurement methods. But once I got over that hump, the device connected very easily, completely seamlessly integrated with the rest of my Kamoer devices on the app, and ultimately worked a treat. Now, I know the burning question is it accurate? Can you rely on the values? Now, all I can say to that is that the temperature, the pH, and the salinity was very, very comparable with all of my other devices on the Dream Reef tank. I've not yet measured AWP on this tank, and I did not have the dissolved oxygen sensor to test that out, nor would I know what the value should be, but I can say the values from those other three in temperature, pH, and salinity, or electrical conductivity, I guess, based on the calculations, were as accurate as the other devices I've worked. And realistically, that's about as far as I can push. I don't have a scientific lab where I can really torture test these devices. I can only put them on my Dream Reef tank and tell you how they worked for me. And then, like I said, let you guys make your mind up from there. Now onto the downsides of this product, and there's really only one that I could come up with. I personally have had a long-running issue with getting a push notification sent to my smartphone from Kamoer devices, and something like the Qijian 3 absolutely needs those push notifications working. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people after my Kamoer Reef Master Spa video that told me they absolutely do get push notifications. I am still yet to. I have had some suggestions that I should change my smartphone to a 24-hour clock rather than a 12-hour clock. I don't really want to do that. I guess I could do that to test to see whether the push notifications work or not, but I just don't think I should have to change the way I view the time to get push notifications when all of my other devices do push notifications. So for me, in the short term at least, I have to open the Kamoer app to view the parameters from the Qijian 3. I would absolutely love to see those push notifications come through in future, because realistically, for me, this is a device I would like to set and forget and only get notifications when there are one of those parameters goes out of whack, and it gives me the opportunity to assess the data, see if it's a blip in the radar or if it's a trend and there's something I need to action. So if you've got push notifications working from Kamoer, I cannot think of a single downside of this product. If, like me, you're yet to get push notifications working, it's something you're gonna have to work around. All right, guys, there you have it. That is my overview, unboxing, and setup of the Kamoer Qijian 3. As I've said multiple times in this video, it's absolutely not a review, and it's definitely not telling you whether you should buy it for your aquarium or not. Please do take in all of the information I've provided in this video and make an informed decision for you and your aquarium. Of course, if you do have any questions, comments, or feedback for either myself, the Dream Reef, or of course, the Kamoer Qijian 3, please feel free to pop it in the comment section down below. I do personally reply to each and every comment there, so it is the best way to get hold of me. Of course, if you're yet to become a subscriber of the channel, please hit that button in the bottom corner there. It takes 2 seconds of your time, costs no money whatsoever. We are edging closer towards 30,000 members, which will be a huge milestone in this channel that I cannot wait to go past. And of course, last but not least, a massive thank you to all of these names on screen here. These are channel members who do chip in a couple of bucks each month to make it possible for me to pick up things like the Kamoer Qijian 3 to do these reviews for you, or not reviews as we've labeled it, so you can have a look at the product without spending any money first and make an informed decision to see whether it's going to suit you and your aquarium. So again, thank you to these channel members. Other than that, guys, I look forward to bringing you some more awesome reef tank tours soon, so stay tuned for that. And otherwise, stay safe and keep reefing. Cheers, bye.